utter nitty-gritty of a good teacher. You've got to be able to break stuff down into the right size bits for the person you're working with. First of all, you have to have an activity that they want to do, that maybe they didn't know they wanted to do it, but once they get into it, they're finding this is something that I want to get involved in.
Welcome to Inspiring Voices, the podcast of the Sing Up Foundation. We believe in harnessing the power of singing to improve mental health and well-being for children and young people. I'm Baz Chapman, and in this first series I'll be speaking with inspirational singers, music leaders, researchers and other specialists to consider the unique role of singing, songwriting, voice exploration and creative music making in transforming young people's mental health and well-being.
Inspiring Voices, a new podcast from the Sing Up Foundation.
My guest is Mark Bick, who is a renowned and highly experienced community musician and trainer. Most of his working life has been based in Gloucestershire, particularly starting up what has now become the Music Works. He's also worked in the West Midlands, developing and leading training courses, including the Quench Arts New Horizons course, which has been running for nearly 20 years, which makes me feel old. The core of Mark's work has been with young people who struggle with various barriers, including those excluded from school and who are looked after or have disabilities. Mark is a board member of Sound Sense, the UK professional association for community musicians, and he still plays in gigs, although he says as not often as he would like to, and he loves learning new instruments. Well, Mark, you and I have known each other since my days working in the West Midlands with an organisation called Music Leader, and you've overseen in your career a real development in the world of community music. So how do you think community music has grown and developed over the past few decades?
I think it's matured a huge amount, and it's the last 15, 20 years that it really got a focus on the things it can do and the things it can do well. And I think one of the current big issues is well-being. And we've realised how powerful the work we do in the well-being area is across all. I go to a community choir every Wednesday, and last Wednesday I went feeling rubbish. I had one of those days, and I came out of it with my well-being just sky high. And I think that applies across all sorts of situations and sectors. And I think that was always there right from the Frankie Armstrong, who was doing that before community music really had been coined as a term. But I think in the early years, I remember back in the 90s, people tended to find community music by what we weren't. We weren't formal education. We weren't school. We weren't telling people what they had to do. We weren't imposing notation on people. And now we've got far more relaxed about those things and focus much more positively on all the things we can do and can do well, which I think is great.
And what evidence have you seen? I mean, apart from your own experience there of a community choir, working with young people, perhaps those in particularly challenging circumstances, what kinds of things can singing do for them?
Over and over again, people with low confidence, people who don't believe that they can achieve, people whose sense of well-being is not so great. Just that whole process, singing and writing songs as well. I think writing songs is such a powerful part of it. And just last night, I had a reel come through on my feed of a weddings band that's got 3 young musicians. I remember them when they were like 11, 12, and they're now, late 20s, mid 30s. Fabulous, tight, really. But I saw them, quite a few of them went to university to do music from families where no one had ever been to college before. And then, very troubled kids who, not those particular ones, but other ones who, just that sense of being able to achieve something and be able to have a voice, all those things. It's a wide spectrum of stuff that it can do for people. It's been quite well researched by others.
What about the this sort of aspect of trauma? So young people who, as you said, are troubled or may have something in their past, which means that their well-being in life is not as good as it should be. What we use the phrase trauma informed. What does trauma informed practice mean?
I wouldn't say I'm an expert on it. I think most of the trauma I've done a lot with pupil referral units. So most of the stuff which could be labelled as trauma is kind of really bad experiences of education, of learning, and bad starts in life, caused by stuff in families. So yes, that is trauma, isn't it? And I think what I've seen a lot of in pupil referral units is young people who've struggled with learning, maybe from 10 years before. When we see them in year 10, maybe they've struggled with learning for 10 years at that stage. And they've found all sorts of strategies just to avoid learning. Learning is painful. Learning means failure. Learning means feeling shit about yourself. So I'm just going to avoid it. And they're brilliantly developed strategies for avoiding learning, from the aggressive to the comical to the climbing on the roof, hiding in the cupboard, to just blanking, a whole, getting banned, finding ways to get banned. It's very skilled at it. And I quite often say to them, you say you're not any good at learning, but you seem to have learned these things really well. Once I have a relationship with them, it's a bit confrontational at the early stage, but once we can have a laugh about it, it's different perspective. Then music then engages, and if you're skilled, and you have to have the skills to make the barriers achievable, to break it down into steps. You have to have the flexibility to connect with the things that really motivate.
You might find a young person who is particularly resistant, say in a pupil referral unit. Somebody might think, well, singing is probably the last thing that you might ask that young person to do, or actually get them to do. So what are the tactics to get, or the strategies to get from that point of them avoiding anything from you because you're an adult, asking them to do a thing, to a point where they are expressing themselves in a transformational way?
The starting point is you only try doing that. I would only try doing that with people that have some desire to make music or to sing. But that's a surprisingly high number. And often, again, over and over again, young people particularly have these secret lives. And the more troubled their lives has been, the more often you find they write reams of lyrics or poetry completely secretly and quietly, and have often wondered whether they could put that into music, or they sing in their room. I remember one lovely lad who, he was desperate to record a particular quite old-fashioned and soppy song for his mum, who he was separated from, and so that, and we've got an education system that likes to play it safe. If you're struggling, let's just focus on the maths and English and leave the other things. If you've got disabilities, let's focus on your life skills. Let's make sure that you can cope with going to the shop and buying something. If you're female, you can cope with managing your period, okay? Or those kind. I've had that said to brilliant musicians that I've worked for. Don't bother with music. You need to focus on these things. And actually, it's the things that are a bit dangerous, the things that are close, that are personal, that have the most power. The voice is the most personal of instruments, because a lot of instruments have a lot to do with our body, but voice more than anything. So it therefore, speaks most deeply, and it's also the most democratic instrument, because you don't need money to have a voice and be able to sing. So there's lots of very deep and important reasons why singing is a hugely powerful thing.
So tell me a bit more about the songwriting aspects and how you've seen that have, I think you're saying that's particularly important in this work.
Yes, it allows, it very simply allows people to say stuff that they want to say. Young people are people. They have a whole range of fears. They face a lot of challenges in their life. They want to talk about it. And those things are important. There's so much of school doesn't touch upon stuff that matters, that is in the mind, of young people day in, day out. You know, am I wanted? Do I belong anywhere? Am I safe? You know, those fundamental questions, and those can all be explored. And my experience is you don't often need to lead anything. You just facilitate, and it comes out. And sometimes you need to negotiate and moderate a bit. Yeah, I think sometimes you have to remind you: do you want to make that public? Is that risky? What might the impacts be? If you want, we can just keep that between, unless it's something that's safeguarding or something like that. We can keep it confidential if you want. That's up to you. And that gradually enabling young people to express and then think about what and how they share and what the impacts of sharing. These are just huge. They touch upon the guts of life, which so much of education doesn't touch on.
So with that comes a lot of responsibility. If you're almost managing that person's ability to be able to deal with some of their most deep-rooted feelings. So how do you avoid it being therapy?
Well, I think that an awful lot in life, like the community choir I go to, is therapeutic. But obviously we're not there in a clinical role, and I'm not a music therapist. I'm not clinically trained. We work in partnership with those who are. We work in partnership and we communicate with senior managers. We don't do it alone. So we discuss boundaries, we think about boundaries. I'm fairly flexible about boundaries, but I wouldn't do it on my own, and I would discuss it, and I would make sure the senior managers, my line managers, and the place I'm working and the people I'm working for know fully about what I'm doing and what risks. So I would risk assess, and I wouldn't hesitate to. But I just find if I'm led by the young people, most people, adults and young people who struggle, say, with mental health, they're quite expert on managing their. And obviously, teenagers, it wobbles and I haven't worked so much with younger children, but listen to them and observe and discuss. Be real. Don't pretend, and just be alert and aware of risks, and don't do it alone. So I've worked in partnership with music therapists in a special school, and that's great. We just talk about someone, and they would pick things up in their sessions, or give me advice on how to set boundaries.
So do you think that there's potential for more of that kind of thing to happen, a better crossover between the music practitioner and a therapist?
Yeah, there's been daft opposition, and that's changed. That's yet another thing as we've matured in community music as a profession. And I think teachers in schools are just, again, vary hugely, but the biggest barrier for teachers in schools is just pressure of time and number of children that they have to deal with. But forever, as long as we've had education, teachers have addressed well-being and got alongside young people, and sometimes been a bit flexible about boundaries in order to be with someone and make a difference. But again, the rules, you don't do it alone. You don't do it without telling other people you trust. And you have to make judgments about what's manageable. And just, certainly with teenagers, I'm honest. I try, and I've learned to be more honest. I don't have the capacity. I can't help you with this, but I can talk with you to someone who can. Once you've got that depth of, it's so important to respect that depth of relationship. And making music together, it is slightly dangerous. The harsh reality is we have had more problems with safeguarding issues between staff and young people in music than you get in other subjects. And that's because music breaks down barriers. And so all the positive things do create more risks. We just have to take a lot of care. We have to talk to people. We have to be sensible. But that doesn't mean not taking risks. It just means informed risks and shared risk, and carefully thought out risk. And I say carefully thought out, but if I'm honest, sometimes, I take a risk on the spot with the young people about letting them talk about something very personal or risky. I'm quite well trained up in safeguarding. I've done a lot of safeguarding, so I've got a strong sense of where the boundaries are, and would just be very straight. I need to tell someone about that. I can't keep that secret. I can't keep that quiet. But the young people, the ones that have the more dangerous lives, know this stuff inside out. And obviously the risks that they play with you as well to push the boundaries. And there's a dynamic, there's a natural childhood dynamic. As soon as someone can be trusted as your parent, with my own son, or as a parental like figure, you say, do they really care about me? Or they just do it because their job? How much can I push them? And when I reach the edge, and that process can be pretty tricky, but we need to be informed, and expect some of this stuff, but also have the team behind us to manage it and deal with it.
So what's the appeal? What's the reward of working in what is obviously a really challenging environment, and where you must feel pretty tired after a day's work?
I don't do, but the thing that wears me out is management and admin and finance. Okay. And to that, actually, generally this kind of stuff is quite energizing. There are times the trauma, and that sense of wanting to rescue someone who's in a horrible situation and feeling powerless too. And it wouldn't be right you wouldn't be able to anyway. I think the same way as music therapists have supervision, I think any music leader and teacher that's working in this area needs to have supervision. That's someone that is fully informed in terms of counselling, therapy, those kind of things, who you can say, working with this kid, I wake up thinking about the person because of the traumatic in their life. You need to have someone you can talk to. And I think organisations working in this and schools need to make sure that staff have someone they can talk to confidentially, separate from the discipline system or anything like that.
Let's go on to talk a bit about the workforce, because you've a lot of experience as a trainer of community practitioners. First of all, just tell me what, particularly in the field of children and young people's mental health and well-being, which can cross over from a young person in a privileged with a privileged young life right through to someone in terrible circumstances. What are the attributes of a successful practitioner who's working in this field?
The first thing is you need to have a comfortableness in yourself. If you're trying to put on a persona and pretend to be someone other than you are, if you're not reasonably secure in who you are and how you are, in your strengths and your weaknesses, then that makes you, one, it makes you vulnerable, but two, I think that my experience is young people who have had traumatic times, they have often had social worker after social worker, all sorts of professions involved. They have such powerful, to put it bluntly, bullshit detectors, and they will see through you if you're not able to be authentic. And none of us can do that perfectly, and we may be better some days than others. And I think that doesn't mean that you still keep that. It doesn't mean it's appropriate to dump your rubbish on the young person. That would never be right. We still need to be the grown-up in the situation. But we need to be able to be real and be honest. And that breaks, once young people can suss out that you are that, of such a huge variety of people who are extrovert, introvert, all sorts of different personalities, all sorts of different kinds of music, people say to me, I don't know if I can work with young people because I'm not brilliant with technology, or I don't do this, or I don't do that. I think most of that's irrelevant or less relevant. if we can just be. Young people are desperate for someone who now obviously they're more interested in working with us if we can enable them, if we've got the technical or musical or whatever skills to enable them to do the thing that they want to do. So that's a meeting point in social pedagogy. We call that the common third. So that's critical. And if we can get better at that, if there's some of those things we can develop, that's great. And there's lots. So then there are just being a good teacher. So in my definition, at a nitty gritty of a good teacher, you've got to be able to break stuff down into the right size bits for the person you're working with. First of all, you have to have an activity that they want to do, that maybe they didn't know they wanted to do it, but once they get into it, they're finding this is something that I want to get involved with. So being able to explain it clearly, have a language. So if you're lost in jargon and you use jargon that makes no sense to the young person in front of you, that won't work. You've got to have those skills to break it into bits, explain it clearly, and then give positive feedback. So these are fundamental teaching skills. And I say to the people I train, if you go to a really posh school where kids are really well behaved and there's really good discipline, you can get away without having these skills because the kids will just behave anyway. But actually, in exactly that school, they will do far better if you have your feedback skills, your explanations, your breaking down in steps right, and you've got that stuff right. So the course I do, we spend a lot of time just focusing on getting that stuff right. You can add a lot of fancy stuff, but if you haven't got that right, you get a lot of trouble. And then observing, being observant with your ears, with your eyes, pay attention to body language, listening to the words with your brain, understanding, thinking about what is someone saying to me? What does that mean? What am I seeing from them? What am I hearing from them? So musically and words, and just really paying attention to that. And I think that being a reflective practitioner, so all that stuff you take in, that feedback you get from your student, from your group, individual group you're working with, when you get stuck, you write it down, you reflect on it, or you have someone that you talk with about it. Pragmatically, as a community musician, if you get good at reflecting in your head in the car, if you're having to drive here, there, and everywhere, that becomes more efficient. But what is going on for this young person? What are all those signs telling me? And what does that mean for our next session? Or where we're going overall?
That's a lot going through your mind when you are also in the process of making music and leading the making of music.
Yes.
So a bit of multitasking, I think.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it is a lot. And for goodness sake, don't play an instrument that you can't play without thinking about it.
Okay.
So, I could take a guitar in and I could play my guitar, and I could, do the basics, do the stuff that I do without ever having to think. I would never, I wouldn't use a piano or a keyboard, because although I could play piano, I have to think about it because you got to pay attention. So behavior, so strategy. I didn't talk about strategies for managing, preempting. One of the things about behavior is an issue, and you can't pretend it's not. But a good teacher can see it coming and change direction, change tack, so that it never happens. And you think, why are these teachers that mysteriously never having problems with behavior? And it's just they can see it coming and they change tack. And that applies from tiny little people, tiny children through to adults.
So is this, are these things that you are sort of innate amongst people who have sort of got the gift for working in this field, or can it be learned, do you think?
I think that the only two things that have to be there as prerequisites for someone who's going to work in this territory is wanting to do it, caring about people, and having that emotional commitment, which makes it so. In terms of working with people with disabilities, I've had people say to me, I find it too disturbing. Looked after children. I say, okay, I'm not going to force you to work in this sector. Actually, caring enough, having enough empathy for it to hurt and be uncomfortable is actually good, but let's work out how we manage that. That's how we make so caring enough to be able to do it is obviously not caring so much that you're paralyzed by it. And then musicality, having some musicality that you can share that's relevant to the young people. Those are the two basic things. I think all the rest are skills that could be learned. And some of us my dad happened to be a counsellor, and I remember when I was 14, I went on a course that he led about group dynamics and things like that. So I came in with a lot of this stuff that you pick up. People don't realise how much they pick up from parents. I was talking to a student I've got at the moment. Her parents and family are all youth workers, and you pick up stuff from your background. But if you haven't had that background, then you can pick it up in other ways. You learn an awful lot on the job, and I think that breaking down into the right size, those fundamental teacher skills, they're eminently learnable. And if you're watching, if you're observing, then I make mistakes all the time. I make horrendous mistakes. I remember a lad, we were doing ukulele and playing Rock Around the Clock, I think. He was about 11-year-old in the pupil referral unit. And he was going great. He was doing brilliantly. I thought, this is great. Let's write the lyrics down and put the chords on top. Big mistake. He was highly dyslexic and wrote the chords backwards, was so traumatized by the experience, he would never play the ukulele again. I actually had to shift, and we did music tech from that on. Huge mistake that I made by just assuming, not knowing, and not thinking before I, in my excitement, charged on. So that, we make mistakes, we learn from them. And I suspect if I hadn't been carried over with my own excitement, I might have seen a cloud on his face before we got to the point where he was traumatized by it.
Now, do you think a practitioner, I suppose in addition to their reflection on their practice, how do they understand how successful they've been, or how do they understand the outcomes of the work that they've done?
I'd say mostly I understand it just by seeing and hearing the young people. So, a girl in pupil referral unit, I thought her first lesson, she got halfway through singing Ed Sheeran's A Train, got one note wrong, swore at me, threw the piece of paper across the room and stormed out. Triggered swear words. And the breakthrough was when she came back. Rather than telling her off for swearing, I said, I'm glad you cared enough about it to get upset, that you care about music. And I'm glad that you've got a good enough musical ear that you could hear that you sung one note wrong. And you sang right. She stared at me like I was completely bonkers because she thought I was going to tell her off about the swearing. And according to the PRU rules, I should have, but I was good terms with the boss, and we knew that the breakthroughs were more important than always following the rules to the letter. And she knew what the rules were. I don't think she ever swore again with me. Oh, she might occasionally have had the odd swear word slip out. I didn't notice that. But when 5, 6, maybe a month or so, a couple of months later, it's been a half-term holiday, she came back. She'd recorded 6 tracks of songs that we'd been working on, and some we hadn't, with some mate of her mum's in a studio in his house. So that was my feedback. She sang, and I listened to them, and they were spot on. So their achievement, she went on to do Arts Award as well, but their achievement, changes in them, and maturity in them. So that's the stuff that matters most to me. And I think the real evaluation, and I haven't caught up with her for a while. I do know her mum and the pub she used to work with. I'm in a rural area, so everyone knows everywhere. But seeing them 10 years later doing stuff, and we don't do enough 5-10 year follow-up. I think maybe it's a feature of getting old that he's pitching people many years on. But I know Quench Arts I work with, I'm just doing a case study for Sound Sense about someone who started as a participant at 15. She had mental health difficulties in special school, in mainstream school, told them music didn't matter. Went to a Quench activity, Quench Wavelength, started doing stuff from there, started off working with the Mac and his Midlands Arts Centre in Birmingham. And it's really developed. She's just a great music leader now. She's gone for participant and brilliant singer. And she came across technology through Quench. And listen to her reels online of her sampling stuff and singing over the top of it, and it's powerful. It's professional level stuff. So that's what matters to me. I'm afraid I haven't much time for paperwork and things. So talk to Simon Glenister at No Solution if you want stuff about proper evaluation.
You mentioned Sound Sense there, which is the professional association. Why does community music need a professional association? And just tell us a bit more about Sound Sense.
It's been going a very long time, since 30 years on. I think if we develop all this stuff in isolation without talking to each other, we won't grow as fast. We need the support of each other. When you're working freelance, it's quite isolated. Most of the organisations in community music are fairly small with limited resources, so that there are some bigger ones as well. But we're much like anything, you're stronger together than separate, and learning. This is, learning and pushing the profession forward, getting better. There's always space to get better at what we do. And if we communicate and support each other, and we need new people coming in, and those new people, I think the Arts Council recently have recognised that those early stages, post-training, when practitioners then are launching out and at their first few years, that's when people most need support. And people working in the formal education sector, if they can link up with those of us in community music and cross-fertilisation between sectors, you need an organisation, I think, to enable that. If bits will happen on the ground and Sing Up do great stuff in networking and things, but it's good to have something focused.
So you've a lot of experience of training, and there may be people listening to this podcast who are either starting out in a career, or they're existing music practitioners who want to know more about working in more challenging contexts or connecting their singing and music making with mental health and wellbeing. First of all, just can you explain a bit about what training to be a community musician actually looks like?
And people say to me over and over again that they do teach training, they do a course, but then it's the kind of on the job learning afterwards. It is, I think we need more of an apprenticeship model. I don't want to undermine what the people in HE do, and I think that at higher education, I think that's good. But so Quench, because it's a delivery organisation that is running projects, we work alongside people and we do the certificate in music education, CME, from Trinity Guildhall, and so it's practical, very practical. We talk about stuff, we discuss stuff, but we also so most powerful learning comes when we have a discussion in the training sessions about what happened yesterday for one of our people on our course in their setting, and discuss how. And we one of them was doing supply teaching in a school, and we were discussing behaviour management in that context. We had a very interesting discussion about what happens if you are an artist yourself, and the kids you work with get online and find the stuff that you did and start kind of hanging around your classroom because they really like what you did when you were a teenager and things like that. So, just a vast variety of issues that we discuss and deal with. Managing your managers, if you've got a manager, whether they're perfect or not, how you actually deal with your manager and communicate with your manager. So it's It's practical. Those kind of basics I went through earlier, we root it in that. That's the rooting of it. We do the CME. And I think the bottom line is any bit of training is just part of a larger professional development journey that carries on all through someone's life. That it's been said many times, but it's true. To be any good in any profession, you have to carry on learning. I don't think any of us want surgeons or GPs who said, "Oh, I've had enough of learning."
Yeah. So what's the future? Do you see community music changing or evolving further over coming years, coming decades?
Yes, I think we need to evolve our training further. We need to link the HE people and the people doing it in the community. I think we need to develop those links. We need more resources for training. We need to continue to diversify. I think sound sense, we've got challenges in racial diversity, ethnic diversity. I think quite a lot of people are doing community music and not using that label. And they're perfectly entitled not to use that label. But I think there's a lot, if we can find ways to connect with each other and learn from each other, I think that would be good. There's so many things. The stuff I was talking about supervision and mentoring, I think if we can have mentoring going on for people and available, I have wondered about whether we could provide kind of crisis. And when you're freelance, you're very isolated. But I think there's also we certainly sound sense and the community music sector. We are still not linking up enough as organisations. There's organisations that within them have got a lot of powerful learning and have learned a huge amount of stuff about how to do things well, and we're not getting together and talking about that. And we have had more than a decade, and then COVID on top, when it's become financially and then practically with COVID more difficult to get together. But online, doing Zoom, that's open stuff which we couldn't do before. Sound Sense has a monthly online gathering that's open to everybody, and that's a very simple, powerful thing. I think I'd like to see us more connected, and this a real seriousness about the need to learn from one another, and obviously the stuff that Sing Up Foundation are doing about voice and mental health and working with that. That's part of that whole move that needs to continue to increase the quality and depth and standard of what we do.
So to finish, Mark, your most or one of your most inspiring vocal moments. So this can be from at any point in your life, something that has really stuck with you.
A very early experience of me in a youth project in Cardiff in the late 80s, and again, two girls singing "Sweet Dreams Are Made of This" in harmony, and I programmed. These are the very early stages in the late 80s of having computers and things. I programmed the backing for it and then performing it. So that's a very early, going right back and singing that getting that harmony right for "Sweet Dreams Are Made by This" by Eurythmics. So yeah,
it's a great song
at an early stage.
Yeah. Well, Mark, it's so interesting hearing about your work, and I hope that there will be people who might be inspired to go into the world of working with music and working with some of the young people who haven't had the best chances in life, and seeing if there's a way that music can unlock things for them in a way which can be very rewarding to be a part of, as you said. So, Mark, thank you very much.
Thank you. My message: don't be frightened of it. Just make sure you got the help around you. And sometimes it's just like lighting the blue touch paper on exploding. With so many of these young people, they're just waiting for it to connect. It's such a rewarding thing to do.
This is Inspiring Voices, the podcast of the Sing Up Foundation. Join us for the rest of the series on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, and other major platforms. You can also watch the video of each episode on the Sing Up Foundation YouTube channel.
Inspiring Voices, a new podcast from the Sing Up Foundation.